Hi everyone, Nick here, and today I'm joined by Jesse Davidson, Managing Director of Auction Works. Jesse, thank you very much for sitting down with me today.
Pleasure.
Mate, we're going to talk all things auction. And you've been in the news a bit recently, I've noticed, across all the media with Elite and REB, letting people know about auctions. What is happening with everyone is focusing on this at the moment, clearance rates and things like that. But you're doing, how many auctions a week are you doing? Because you do quite a few, don't you?
Yeah, quite a few. So on average, probably personally, I do about 1,500 a year. As a business, we do 2,500, 3,000 a year, I suppose. We're trying to grow that as always.
Yeah.
But that's about what I do. But ranging from sort of 30 a week, probably I try not to do too many less than that, and then right up to 50 or 60 if we have bigger weeks.
Okay, so you're very well placed to know what's happening in the market with auctions at the moment, given the volume that you're seeing. Has that picked up in the last month or so, or where do we see the interest with it?
Yeah, good question. So the answer is no, not necessarily. I mean, it has to a degree. So obviously the start of the year was very, very low in stock. Hasn't necessarily picked up, I don't think, in the last 2 months, but there's a good reason for that. We're now in June, July. We're in the sort of depths of the winter months. A lot of people are overseas, a lot of people are on holidays, and as a result, we do see a limited amount of stock come to market in these periods of time. So what we're seeing at the moment isn't too concerning. However, your point around, I think the first point about what we're seeing in the market at the moment, the biggest thing we're seeing as auctioneers is a lack of stock. And that lack of stock is underpinning a good clearance rate. And it's quite funny, we hear in our jobs, people in the media talk about, the 78% clearance rate this Saturday. They always seem to forget to mention that stock's down 50%. And that gives you a little bit more of an indication as to how a market's performing, I think.
Okay. And mate, the reason I wanted to get you on today is because, and especially for the newer generation that are coming through, is how auction can actually play a pivotal scene in securing the business. Because I mean, at the moment, like you said, there's a lot of people on holidays. We are in the middle of winter at the time of filming this, and spring is going to be on our doorstep before we know it. So I know how I used to do it back in the day. So I've got a couple of questions here I'd like to go through with you, if that's okay. Basically, about how auction can progress the conversation, because you don't always want to be calling up a vendor saying, are you ready to go yet? Are you ready to sell? So, mate, the first one that I've got, and this is pretty much spring related. Why is it time now in the middle of July to start thinking about spring auctions?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'd say with that is that the success of your auction campaign, of course, is underpinned by the quality of the agent. There's no denying that. Of course, we believe that auctioneers make a big difference as to the quality of the end result. But at the end of the day, if the agent's not good at what they do, we can't do much about it, right? So first things first, the good agents at the moment are setting up their campaigns for 6 and in fact 8 and 10 weeks out. They're not just focusing 3 and 4 weeks out. So one of the things is that if you're going to employ a quality auctioneer to conduct your auction during that busy spring period, there is a much higher chance that auctioneer is going to be more heavily booked and more difficult to get for that auction. So we're seeing a lot of our premium clients particularly have got very much set programs as to how they're going to run the next month, 2, 3 months. And as a result, we fall into that program and they're booking those auctions. Typically, we're finding the good agents are booking 6 to 7 weeks out. Often we find 8 weeks is too far. By the time different things change for families and stuff like that. But 6 and 7 weeks is where the good top tier agents are booking their auctioneers to ensure that they get a quality auctioneer and get the result they want on the day. But also, I think it's not just booking the auctioneer in, it's also understanding that having that understanding of how the next 6 weeks will fall assists you making it a more seamless process. If it's all rushed into 4 or 5 weeks, it makes it a lot more difficult.
And stressful for the vendor as well.
Totally.
They're very overwhelming. So, Jesse, are they booking actual property auction dates 6 weeks or so in advance, or are they just securing a time?
Outstanding question. So a little bit of both. We try as best as possible when somebody pre-books in advance to get an address, to get some sort of commitment, I suppose, as to the fact that they want that particular time or date. But I would be lying if I said that we don't have some of the larger clients that hold off periods of time. So they'll say, Jess, I want to hold you 1:30, 2:30, and 3:30 on the 17th of September, because we're almost certain that we'll have those dates. Now, we've got an amazing girl in my office, Laura Beattie, who looks after all our bookings, and Laura will obviously be 6 or 7 weeks in advance herself. So if we haven't filled that slot, she's making calls to say, Nick, we haven't heard from you. What's the go? Not running it. Okay, let us get to work with someone else to fill that slot.
Yeah. And is that, Jesse, is that a good position for an agent? So just for an agent at the moment to book those spots, so as is, because I guess the whole premise of this video is to go back to a vendor with good quality information and say, we've booked these 3 dates. Does any suit your particular timeline and movement? The reason that we're doing this is because
totally. So a lot of agents want a specific time, right? So there's a lot of agents that don't too, Nick. It's probably worth mentioning this. There's a lot of agents that quite frankly do not care the time of day. I was part of an article with REB. I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you are a good agent and you have a good auctioneer, the property will sell anytime, any day. It doesn't necessarily matter. But there are little intricacies, I suppose, about certain properties. For example, your property might get a gorgeous easterly sun. So it might get some beautiful morning sun. So as a result, people want to remind those buyers at 11 a.m. how good the amazing sun is at this property in the morning. Whereas at 3 o'clock, the sun might drop behind the mountain in behind it, like you do up at, say, in a place like Palm Beach. And then suddenly the properties on the eastern side get pretty poor afternoon sun. So you don't necessarily want to rub that into the face of the buyer as well. So being prepared isn't just about picking the time. It's also about trying to find a time that's suitable to your asset.
Okay, so this takes me back to a place I sold in Annandale in 2017, and it was 100% it was that exact reason, because we literally had, now we held it out the front because it was on Johnson Street of Parade, so you know, a fanfare. Apartment was at the back of the building, but we had to, even our open home times, we had about 15, 20 minutes of good quality sun because there was a building right next door. So it doesn't matter if it suits the property. So if it is an afternoon, if that's when you're going to get the sunlight because the building next door is blocking the morning light. Okay, so that's interesting. So there's no right or wrong, morning or afternoon. Property dependent.
Little things, if you're going to be doing your, a home in a school zone, then don't do a 3:30 on a Wednesday afternoon if your house is 2 doors up from a school.
Yes.
There's a multitude of reasons why you would pick and choose the times. And one of the things, and I think to round off the point that you're making, is the first thing that you need to do is make sure that your auctioneer is available, and make sure that time, of course, is going to be suitable to the auctioneer. The biggest problem we have in our business is that somebody said to an owner, we'll get our auctioneer at 11 a.m.
Yes.
They book it 3 or 4 weeks out from the auction. Well, I've been booked for four weeks already.
Right.
And as a result, we can't fulfill that requirement. And then we obviously feel bad that we're not able to fulfill the requirement for the owner and the agent. But at the same point, we sometimes lose work off the back of it because that agent has promised the owner to be 11 o'clock. We can't do it, and they have to find somebody else that can do the 11. So just making sure that you're having those communications before booking them, Nick. I think that's the big one.
So does that mean, so at the moment, so for an agent that's watching this now and wants to use some information that you're giving them to get a listing, is that something where they could come back? I know I could come to you and say, hey, Jesse, look, I know that we've been talking about doing something in spring. I had a chat to our auctioneer at the moment because they are starting to book up. We've had a bit of a chat about your property, and we think, or given, the property itself with the morning sun or blah, blah, blah. He's got a couple of dates and times available. Would any of these work for you? Is that a way an agent can slip in the auction and securing an auction date to progress that pipeline and progress that seller to actually committing?
Absolutely. And I think also working to a calendar gives an owner a bit of an indication as to your preparation, how accountable you are to being an agent, and also delivering on the promises that you're giving. And I'll say this point very quickly if I can. One of the bits of advice I give to my agents is to go into your appraisal meeting with a 6-week calendar as to exactly what is going to happen over the next 6 weeks for that vendor. Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, if you employ my services, this is what the next 6 weeks look like.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening if the agent does that successfully with the vendor is that the vendor buys into the process. The vendor's not cranky on a Wednesday when they haven't had a verbal call because they've checked their diary and they say, no, the verbal call comes on a Thursday. We get our report on a Tuesday and we do an inspection on a Wednesday and then we do our Saturday. So what happens is you get the owners buying into the process and you also get them encouraged to trust the process that you're putting in place for them. So by being organized and by being ahead of the time, you're doing stuff that other agents aren't doing. They're just saying, okay, let's see what we can do on the 27th. You're saying, guys, I'm ahead of the game here. I know you might not launch for 3 weeks, but let's just hold the time because I want the best auctioneer and I want the best time for you. And suddenly that owner goes, well, hold on, I'm throwing up between 2 agents at the moment. The other guy's not talking about this stuff. And so suddenly you stand out.
And I was talking to a trainer the other day, Jesse, and we were talking about the difference between a young agent starting out, not a lot of experience and backing, versus a seasoned agent. Now, a seasoned agent would be someone who's been in the game for 20 years. I've got 200 properties under my belt, can smash a newbie. Whereas how does a new agent stand out? Your property is my 100% focus. And if you're going back to an owner saying, I've been thinking about you, and I think that, based on your property and the features and things like that, this is the best course of action. Again, it's showing an owner that you're putting in that time and due diligence into their property. So whether you've been in the game for 6 months or 60 years, an owner cares about themselves, their property, and what you can do for their property. So I think that's a very big thing. Yeah. So we just lost you for a second there, Jesse, but I was just saying that for a newbie starting out, that's a good way to get in the door, progress a pipeline, especially if the experience part of things is lacking. This shows a point of difference and a certain level of care to one owner's.
And I also have a big belief too, Nick, that if you're trying to build your profile locally, there is no better way to do that than a successful auction campaign. And I think I've said this to you on the phone before, but I say it to my agents all the time. You can do letterbox drops until your fingers bleed. That's fine. But sometimes the best way to tell an owner how good you are is to show them, to say on Saturday at 3:30, come around to Johnson Street, number 37, and watch how hard I work for my owners to get the maximum price. Get them standing in the back of an auction and watching you grind out for $1,000. You can send all the letterbox drops you want. You can send EDMs. You can do everything you want. But at the end of the day, showing them and proving to them how good you are will always be the number one way to win business, I think, anyway.
Now, is that another tool an agent can have in their tool belt, Jesse, when, especially using the next 6 weeks as an example, invite your sellers to an auction or two. If they can't get there, you obviously follow it up with a call and explain the reason. Like, the reason we had the auction at this time was because. The reason we had so many people was because. The reason it was a 2 or 3 week campaign instead of a 4 week campaign was because. And then that way it's a different conversation, which a lot of agents having that in your experience.
No, I don't think they are, Nick. I think it's outstanding advice, but I don't think they are. No, I think too many agents are saying, come to my auction this Saturday. It's going to be a cracker. We'll chat to you after if I get some time, right? And then there's no follow-up call to say, hey, so just so you were aware, when we held the auction up at $1.2 million, I want you to know that between you and I confidentially, we had actually exceeded the reserve price. I wanted to go back to the owners to make sure that they were comfortable with the process and make sure that we could drag out that extra little bit of money. Don't expect people to understand just what they see. You need to explain to them exactly what has occurred and what the things that you've done to make sure that that result is the reason that it occurred is you. Do you know what I mean?
Mate, great point. And it's the one thing I keep ramming home to my members is we are so good at selling our results, but not what we do and how we do it very well. And the part about an auction is auctions to the public, sometimes they can be very quick. They can be 5 minutes, but a 5 or a 10-minute auction can be there is so much going on in it. Now, you don't want to give everything away. I appreciate that. But there is so much that goes on within an auction that people just don't see. And I've been guilty of it as well, whereas I haven't explained why we do what we do a lot of the time. You know, I had one in Paddington where we kept going in and out of it was a Paddington Terrace. They were inside. We had, you know, massive crew outside. Me and my assistant at the time in and out, and it was just a show. And it was just basically, we want to build momentum. We want to show that are we there? Are we not? We wanted to keep that curiosity. So it is correct. Auction day is a show. That is your day.
It is a show. I've got a particular story I'll tell about this. I've got an agent I work with in the inner west who's a fantastic agent, one of my number one agents that I deal with, incredible guy, do a lot of in-rooms work for him. And we have this funny back and forth when I auction for him where it almost sounds like he's trying to try and shut me down a bit to say, hold on a minute, I'm controlling things here. And everybody, I've had one or two people say, oh, geez, he's a bit rude to you, not realizing that it's completely set up. He is there to try and make sure that every owner and everybody in that room feels like he has done every single thing possible to maximize the return for that owner. And make no mistake, that is our job. That is my responsibility. I make no apologies for it. My job is to try and get the best possible price for my owner. And we don't do it in unethical ways. We do it in ways that create urgency, that build momentum, and then get that premium price.
And that's a good point too, Jesse. You're talking about the relationship with the agent, and I've had it with auctioneers I've worked with in the past, and you know, they will know when I'm walking in a certain direction or I've got little hand signals and things like. They know what that means. I know what they're doing at different stages, and you know why you're doing that. And I think for someone who's just seeing what could be a quick auction, it could be a 5 or 10 minute auction, that relationship is what gets that result, because you don't have time to be always running in or having chats and things like that. So a good agent with a good auctioneer who's got that, let's say, secret language or understanding or relationship, when you're dealing with your biggest asset, you need that. You need people who are working collaboratively together. But it does bring me to
without time to think, right? Like we don't have necessarily time to, you know, I made a joke last night. I had some auctions out in Windsor last night. It was a 70-year ownership. And I made a little joke. I said, look, ladies and gentlemen, they've owned it for 70 years. They're not going to take 70 years to make the decision. But, you know, whilst it was a little bit of a cheap, easy joke, the reality is that we need people to make decisions in a very short period of time, right? And that can only be done if the agent's done their job leading into it. The biggest challenges that we see as auctioneers is delays in auctions whereby the agent's left the conversation till the auction, and as a result they've got to spend 4 minutes trying to do what it should have taken them 4 weeks to do, and it's impossible. You just cannot achieve the goal.
We don't want to break the momentum either. While people are in, yes, I want this, there's competition, you don't want them to stop and say, hey, am I paying too much?